It's true. There is a Washington bubble. This place is different. For one thing, common sense is illegal in Washington. It's illegal. For another thing, I've discovered that this is a town of very frustrated ex-class presidents. Many, not all, but many of these frustrated ex-class presidents in Washington, on the Hill and otherwise, they get excited, not in a good way. How are you going to review the spending without reviewing the spending? How are you going to audit the spending by an agency without auditing the agency? That's what I mean when I say common sense is illegal in Washington, D.C. That's what Mr. Musk is doing. He's put together a crackerjack team, and they're going through everybody's spending line by line, item by item. People have been screaming like they're part of a prison riot. Oh my God, look at what Musk is doing. He's looking at the spending.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have 8 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. President. With me today is one of my colleagues from my Senate office, Mr. James Shea. He is one of my right-hand people and does great work, and I'm honored that he could join me today. Gosh, I don't know where to begin. I've been in the Senate for 8 years. In dog years, that's 56 years. And it feels like 56 years. I've learned a lot, met a lot of interesting people. Before I got here, everybody told me about the Washington bubble. And I said, how serious could they be? Well, it's true. There is a Washington bubble. This place is different. It's in its own way, sometimes disappointing, sometimes refreshing. It is deeply weird. For one thing, common sense is illegal in Washington. It's illegal. For another thing, I've discovered that this is a town of very frustrated ex-class presidents. And there's a Washington way of doing things. And when things aren't done that way, when somebody challenges the status quo, many, not all, but many of these frustrated ex-class presidents in Washington, on the Hill and otherwise, they get excited, not in a good way. They can't get their mind around doing anything other than the Washington way. Some of them, particularly in the media, they go almost catatonic, or the exact opposite. They foam at the mouth, and they really get upset. They can make a Valium nervous. It's like the world, we're not doing things the way we've always done them, and the world's going to spin off its axis. I want to try to put in perspective what many of my Democratic friends have been talking about today. They're very, very, very upset at President Trump. And they're very, very, very upset at Elon Musk. President Trump ran for president on a number of issues. One of the issues he ran on, he said it almost every day. He said, if you elect me president, I'm going to go through the entire budget and review all the spending, line by line. If I heard him say that once, I heard him say it 1,000 times. And that's what he's been doing. He went out and appointed, through an executive order, Elon Musk, who some people like him, some don't, but he's not a dummy. He's a very successful business person. He's got a top secret security clearance. President Trump issued an executive order, and he turned to Mr. Musk, and he said, Mr. Musk, I want you to do for me what I said I was going to do in the election. I want you to go through all the spending, line by line. Now, let me ask you something, Mr. President. How are you going to review the spending without reviewing the spending? How are you going to audit the spending by an agency without auditing the agency? That's what I mean when I say common sense is illegal in Washington, D.C. That's what Mr. Musk is doing. He's put together a crackerjack team, and they're going through everybody's spending line by line, item by item. And my Democratic colleagues are very, very, very upset. And they've been very eloquent. They've talked about the process, and President Trump's executive order supposedly violates the Constitution. And they've accused Mr. Musk of having conflicts of interest. And so I've heard people say he's sitting over there with a notepad, copying down everybody's Social Security number, and he's going to go use it to make money. I mean, people in this town, not just my Democratic colleagues, they're really upset. They've never had anybody question their spending. But that's what Mr. Musk is doing. But you know, I've listened. This has been going on for a week. People have been screaming like they're part of a prison riot. Oh my God, look at what Musk is doing. He's looking at the spending. And I've listened to people talk about the process and debate whether it's constitutional and discuss how many lawyers can dance on the head of a pin. But you know what? I haven't heard one single person who's upset with President Trump or Mr. Musk talk about what he's found. They don't want to talk about the spending porn, the waste of taxpayer money that he's found. I mean, that's the point of all this. I tell you who is interested. The American people. The people in America who get up every day and go to work and obey the law and pay their taxes and try to educate their kids and try to do the right thing by their kids and try to save a little money for retirement, and have had to live through 20% inflation under President Biden. They understand what Musk is doing. They understand spending porn and wasting taxpayer money. Now, Mr. Musk started with the USAID. That handles a lot of foreign aid for America. American people are very generous. In our country, when you're homeless, we'll house you. When you're hungry, we'll feed you. In our country, when you're too poor to be sick, we'll pay for your doctor. And we send a lot of money overseas to help our world's neighbors. And the USAID is in charge, in large part, of that. But I'll tell you what Mr. Musk discovered. I find it fascinating. he discovered that the American taxpayers are giving money to Afghanistan. He found that we are giving money to Yemen. He found that we are giving money to Syria. I didn't know that. Some of our foreign aid is going to Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria. He found that the USAID has 10,000 people, 10,000 people, employees. And every year they give away $40 billion. Mr. Musk also found, and I'm not saying that all of this money is wasteful. I'm not. Some of this money, I'm sure, does some good. That's why Secretary Rubio is going to revamp the department to separate the good from the bad. But this is the kind of stuff Mr. Musk found. He found that the USAID gave money to support electric vehicles in Vietnam. Our money, taxpayer money. He found that USAID gave money to a transgender clinic in India. I didn't know that. I bet you the American people didn't know that. He found that the USAID gave $1.5 million to a Serbian LGBTQ group called Grupa Izladaji. I probably mispronounced that, my apologies. Anyway, they got $1.5 million to, quote, advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. What else did Mr. Musk found that my colleagues don't want to talk about? Well, he reviewed a study and then went and checked it. The study was done by the Middle East Forum. They found that USAID spent $164 million to support radical organizations around the world. We're not talking Cub Scout troops here. We're talking about radical organizations around the world. They gave $122 million of that to groups aligned with foreign terrorist organizations. Our taxpayer money. According to this report in Mr. Musk, the USAID has given millions of dollars to, quote, organizations in Gaza, controlled by Hamas. Why aren't my colleagues talking about that? Recipients of the money, they found, have, quote, called for their lands to be cleansed from the impurity of Jews. That's who we're giving foreign aid to. What else? I'm not going to spend my whole time talking about this, but nobody else is talking about it. They're just talking about the process and Mr. Musk, and he's a mean guy, and he shouldn't be looking at our spending. Well, he is. And I kind of find what he's found out interesting. He found that we gave $2 million, USAID did, for sex changes in Guatemala. He found that we gave $20 million to produce a new Sesame Street show in Iraq. He found that we gave $4.5 million of taxpayer money to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. He found that we gave $10 million, USAID did, of meals to an al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group called the Nusra Front. Mr. Musk found that we gave $7.9 million of taxpayer money to a project that would teach Sri Lanka, a bunch of journalists in Sri Lanka, to teach them how to avoid binary gendered language. I don't know what the hell binary gendered language is. I think I do. You think most taxpayers would support that? Why aren't we talking about that? The USAID gave $1.5 million to promote LGBT advocacy in Jamaica. They gave $1.5 million to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. They gave $1.5 million for, quote, art for inclusion of people with disabilities in Belarus. Another $3.9 million for LGBT causes in Macedonia. $8.3 million for equity and inclusion education in Nepal. I could go all night. And many of my colleagues are upset. They're really mad at Mr. Musk. Hell, I think we ought to give him a medal. All he's doing is what President Trump said he was going to do. President Trump said he's going to audit the spending. So Trump goes and hires Musk, again with the top secret security clearance. Nobody can quibble with his intelligence. You know, the guy's as smart as Einstein's cousin. He's a very successful businessman. Some say he's the richest guy in the world. And he's doing the auditing. And man, he's finding a lot of stuff. I call it spending porn. Now, I'm not saying everything that USAID does is wasted. But I'm saying a lot of it is. A hell of a lot of it is. And we ought to be on the floor of this United States Senate thanking Mr. Musk. And we ought to be asking him to go through every agency and look at everybody's budget. Everybody's budget. That's what the American people want. They don't want to talk about process. They don't want to continue with the Washington way. They want to save some money. Now, let me tell you what's really going on here, too, Mr. President. For 4 years under President Biden, and for, 8 years under President Obama, and I respect both of them. I don't hate anybody. I don't. When I say my prayers at night, one of the things I ask God, God, don't let me hate, because it's hard in Washington. Don't let me hate. I have all the respect in the world for President Biden and President Obama. Tough job. But between them, they spent 12 years in Washington. And presidents set the tone. They control the questions that are asked. And here's the question that President Obama and President Biden asked for 8 years. For 12 years. I heard it every single day. Who needs to pay more in taxes? Is it you? Is it you? Who needs to pay more in taxes? We need more money. Who needs to pony up more? That was the issue. But that's not the issue today. We have a new president. You know what the issue is today? What the hell happened to all the money? What the hell happened to all the money? And that's what Mr. Musk is finding out. That's all this is about. And I'm just shocked that my colleagues have decided that this is a hill they're going to die on. How can you look the American people in the eye and support this kind of waste? Support this kind of spending porn? I mean, the election to me made at least one thing clear, that the American people are sick and tired of people in Washington denying reality. The last administration tried to convince us that we were living in a crime-free world where inflation was temporary and the border was secure. And the American people didn't buy it. You know why? Because it wasn't true. And the administration, our last administration, tried to argue that Bidenomics was making our lives better. But the American people knew differently. They understood Bidenomics to mean I get to spend more to live worse. And they voted. Now, I mean, the American people were poorer under the last administration, but they didn't become stupid. They could see that the government was creating a problem, not trying to fix it. And they noticed the national debt, too. Put up that first chart for me. You know what our national debt is, Mr. President? $36 trillion. Not million, not billion. $36 trillion. It takes my breath away. Highest it's ever been, over 100% of our gross domestic product. Our debt's growing faster than our economy. And we toss around these numbers, 1 trillion, 1 billion, 1 million, a squillion, like it's nothing. I want to try to put this in context. If I started counting right now, and I counted one numeral, if you will, per second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I kept counting all day and all night. I didn't sleep. I counted between bites of oatmeal at breakfast. I just counted continually. One numeral per second. It would take me 32 years to count to 1 billion. 32 years to count to 1 billion. It would be 2057. I'd be dead as Woodrow Wilson. I wouldn't live that long. And that's just $1 billion. Our debt's $36 trillion. You know how long it would take me to count to 1 trillion? 31,000 years, if I counted one numeral per second. About as old as Chuck Grassley. 31,000 years. It would take me 1 million years to count to 36 trillion. Those are the kind of numbers we're talking about. And the American people understand it. Since 2019, America's population has grown 2%. We're not having babies. 2%. And that's after massive immigration. You know how much our budget has grown? 55%. 55%. Yeah, we've had inflation. But we hadn't had 55% worth of inflation. That's how we got to this $36 trillion in debt. Put up the next chart for me. Now, some of this money we had to spend during the pandemic. And it was a bipartisan effort during the pandemic. Republicans voted for it, and Democrats voted for it, because we had no choice. I was there. I saw it from the inside. We came this close to losing the American economy. And you know who helped a lot, doesn't get enough credit? Jay Powell at the Federal Reserve. I watched it. The whole world wanted to go into a cave and retreat. Back in the Great Recession, I remember all the other countries in the world who looked to us. They may hate us, but they know we're the greatest country in all of human history. They looked to America. And you know what? Back in the Great Recession, all the other countries wanted they wanted treasuries, treasury notes, treasury bonds. Not this time. They were so scared, they didn't want treasuries. They wanted dollars, cash dollars. So Jay Powell, thank the Lord, he goes over to the Federal Reserve. He opens what's called a currency swap line, and he told every country, you want dollars? I'll trade you dollars for your currency. And everything calmed down. He doesn't get any credit for that. But it was a gutsy thing to do. But on top of that, to save the American economy, that wasn't helping the American economy. We had to keep the economy going. We spent a lot of money. But then COVID ended. And what we should have done was go back to pre-COVID spending. But we didn't do that. President, Biden, after the shutdowns and the coronavirus, the pandemic was over, passed the American Rescue Plan. COVID was over. He spent $1.9 trillion. Never let a good crisis go to waste. I didn't vote for it. Then he came back and passed what he called an infrastructure bill. It was really just the Green New Deal. I know what's in that bill. That was another $1.2 trillion. And then he passed the Inflation Reduction Act. I didn't vote for it. But that was another $1.0 trillion. And then he passed the CHIPS Act. This is really special. He said, big tech, the semiconductor companies need our money. They need taxpayer money. They're not making enough money. And he gave them money. He didn't give hardware stores money. President Biden didn't give the healthcare industry money. He said, I want to help big tech. And boy, they sucked it up like a Hoover Deluxe. We spent $280 billion subsidizing big tech. And you add it all up, and that's $4.3, almost $4.5 trillion. And that's how we got $36 trillion in debt. And that's why Donald Trump said, I'm going to look at every single line item of spending. And that's why he gave the job to Elon Musk. And that's why Musk is auditing these accounts. But nobody wants to talk about what he's finding. Nobody wants to talk about the spending porn, except the American people. They get it, Mr. President. They get it. And I hope Mr. Musk continues. My colleague and friend, we had a little discussion in banking today. Senator Warner makes a good point. He wants Mr. Musk to come over and talk to Congress about how he's doing this. I'm all for that. I am all for that. I would love to have him come over and walk us through what he's doing and how he's discovering all this spending porn. We need all the help we can get on reducing our spending because we can't continue at this pace. I just wanted to spend a few minutes putting all this in perspective, Mr. President. The world's not going to spin off its axis, folks. Every business that I know of goes through an audit. Now we're being audited, but we're being audited by not by the usual auditors, but we're being audited by a person appointed by the President of the United States. And I'm betting you when he's through, and he's going to go to all these agencies. He's starting on the Department of Education next. I think he'll end up finding that some of our money is being well spent. But he's also going to find that some of our money is being stolen, and it's being wasted. And that's an insult to every taxpayer in this country. So I'm going to end like I began. We ought to be giving Mr. Musk a medal. We ought to be thanking him. Maybe nobody else wants to hear about the spending porn, but I can't wait to read the book. I hope he finds all of it and compiles it. I hope Marco Rubio, our new Secretary of State, takes USAID and shakes them by the shoulder and lifts up the good people there and fires the bad people, the people that wasted taxpayer money like this, giving money to terrorist organizations, giving money to organizations that support Hamas. Hope he gets rid of every single one of them. And I think if we listen to Mr. Musk, we can save a lot of money. And I hope he does come over and explain what he's doing. I want to talk about one other subject real quickly. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to repeat it. This is India. This is China, which wants to run the whole world. China's already trying to take over the shipping lanes in the South China Sea. This is the Chagos Islands, right down here. Years ago, the Chagos Islands were owned by France. France ceded the Chagos Islands to our friends in Great Britain, UK. And a number of years ago, the United Kingdom and America got together, and we built, mostly with American dollars, by the way, we built a military base in the Chagos Islands, on one particular island called Diego Garcia. And it's a really important military base. For one thing, it's very close to the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean in China, so we can watch them. For another thing, it's where it's one of the only bases where our nuclear submarines can dock. Hugely important. Well, the United Nations got mad at the United Kingdom. They said, Great Britain, you're bad people. You used to be colonialists. You acquired other countries, sometimes freely, sometimes by force. Every country I know of in the world of any strength has done that. Doesn't mean we ought to be proud of it, but it's part of our history. But the United Nations said, shame on you, UK. Shame on you. Bad, 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 bad. You have to give back the Chagos Islands and the military base there. And the UN doesn't have any jurisdiction over the United Kingdom. But the UN said, not only do you have to give it back, but you don't give it back to the people of the Chagos Islands. You give it back to another group of islands way down here called Mauritius. Mauritius used to own the Chagos Islands when France ceded them to Great Britain. They were run by Mauritius. But the people of the two island groups, archipelagos, the people don't have any affinity. Now, what's Mauritius say? Of course we'll take it. But they want to start charging the United States and the UK £9 billion for a 99-year lease. So we can lease our own military base. All because the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom feels guilty because somebody, some tofu-eating wokarati at the United Nations says they're bad people, bad colonialists. Well, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, he's going along with it. But he says, I'm negotiating with Mauritius. And the people of the leader of Mauritius just issued a press release, said, yeah, he's negotiating. He's increased the price. And he's shortened the leash. Now, you know who's loving all of this? China. Because China has a close relationship with Mauritius. And you know what? It's going to get a lot closer. This is insane. This is cell deep stupid. This is bone deep down to the marrow stupid. Because the United Nations wants the United Kingdom to feel guilty, they want to give our military base and their military base to Mauritius. Now, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom can stop this. And Marco Rubio, our new Secretary of State, is against it. And I haven't talked to him directly, but I think President Trump is against it. The United Kingdom is our friend. I went to school there for a while. I love them. And I want to see the Prime Minister do well. But he needs to put down the bong. He needs to put down the bong. This makes absolutely no sense. And it's going to be a big part of his legacy if he gives away this island and our military base to, in effect, what will eventually be China. So I would say to the Prime Minister tonight, I don't mean any disrespect. I want to say this respectfully. I shouldn't have said the bong part. I take it back. Please, Mr. Prime Minister, don't do this. Don't do this. We'll stand with you in telling the United Nations who's upset with you to go fill out a hurt feelings report, because we're not doing it. We'll stand with you. please say no. Don't give our military base away. It's going to really hurt the relationship between the United States of America and the United Kingdom. I know Donald Trump pretty well. I know Marco Rubio pretty well. They'll forgive, but they'll never, ever forget. Don't do it, Mr. Prime Minister. I've taken too much time, I'm sorry. I yield to my colleague from Virginia.